Welcome to Run With It, the show that normally brings you untapped business ideas from successful founders. Today's episode is a little bit different. Ethan and I are celebrating 100 episodes of recording.
Woohoo! I wish we had like a clap track or something at that point. I think that would be appropriate. Oh, well.
Yeah, champagne bottle popping is what I was thinking, but to each their own. This is actually take 2 of us trying this out. We've behind the curtain a little bit here. You can peek behind the curtain.
It's everybody's own curtain. Their internet sucks every once in a while. So
yeah, exactly. Everyone's dealing with it, but that you kind of have this glorified view of this picture perfect, everything going perfectly, and 100 episodes in, we're still figuring it out. Appreciate you being along for the ride. We're going to talk about a few things that are going on.
Wait, I know the listener right there was like, these guys are not far from perfect.
Yeah, I know. That's probably true. That's part of our charm, really. That's part of the appeal.
Exactly. I mean, that's what I'm going for. I mean, so here's the thing. I mean, in actuality, I'm 100% perfect, but for the podcast, I need to like tone it down a little bit.
Yeah, no one wants to deal with that, right?
It's called relatable.
Exactly. So our podcast producer, Ari, she pushed us to do this partially because we have gotten some feedback that listeners would like to get to know us a little bit better.
Mostly Chris's mom wants to get to know him a little bit better. Why don't you call?
I was going to make a dark joke about how my mom doesn't actually love me. And then So what's going on with me? I'm going to start off talking about something I'm super excited about. We're going to be having another baby in September. And
Chris and Eathan are having a baby.
I know. It's going to be this, gotta make the hair reference. It's going to be this long-haired, kind of like Puerto Rican skin toned. My wife and I are expecting our second child in early September. A lot of changes that we anticipate with that. Hopefully not going to be as nerve-wracking. It doesn't appear to be as nerve-wracking as the first child, but I am super excited. I'm going to be hiring someone full-time. This is going to be my first full-time hire for my marketing consulting agency. And I'm pumped for it. I'm pumped to take a lot of this work off my plate, a lot of the operational stuff. I am using the guys at Tropical MBA, their service, Dynamite Jobs, to do this. It's a hiring service. It's a decent bit of coin to put up front to have someone else do this hiring for you. But their pitch is they distill your work down to 6 hours or so from their estimate of 30 to do a new full-time hire. But yeah, if you're interested in learning more about that position, it's a remote marketing operations manager. You can visit engineeredagency.com/about-us, and you can find some details. You'll find the link to the job posting. It's basically going to be my right-hand person. It was cool posting the job. I was thinking about what kind of work environment that I would want to aspire to myself, because oftentimes you have this vision of what you want work to be like, and you don't check in on that regularly, and you just kind of go along with the flow. And there's some interesting benefits that I put in there, like every other Friday off. You're working full-time, every other Friday off. Thinking about how much vacation I would want someone to have, and I started out with 4 weeks, which that's decent for a full-time employee who is probably earlier on in their career.
So you actually going to treat them as an employee with like W-2s and stuff, or just calling it that and they're a contractor? How you doing? Yeah,
it's a full-time contract position. I was thinking about that. The W-2 thing is, I was open to the W-2. The Tropical MBA guys said that it's probably not going to dissuade people to go the contractor route. And honestly, I'm trying to go fast here because of the baby. So if someone came back and said that they really wanted that W-2 position, then I'd be open to it. But unless someone is really asking for it.
Well, from my experience, I have to say, trying to do W-2s versus contractor, it was a lot bigger of a headache. I just decided not to even do it, because it's not just, do you have a commitment? It's like, there's like paperwork, and there's regulations, and there's insurances, and there's different types of taxes. At least that's been my experience of having someone as an employee. It can just become mounds more busy work and extra expenses.
So the question that I have about that is, if someone is a de facto full-time employee for you, if they're working 40 hours a week, let's say, does the government just see?
Yeah, you can get
through
sued,
that?
basically. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's now that we have like this gig economy. I mean, if you look at like Uber, right? I think they've been through a lot around that, right? Oh, you got these people, and basically Ubering has become their job. And so, is it fair to call them a contract worker? Do you have to treat them like an employee? I mean, that's been, I don't know if it's in the news today, but it's been in the news in the past, 5 or 10 years, let's say. So, I think that the world's changing, so it's a little bit tough. I've definitely been on the edge of that with the different work that I do. Like I tend to have people that are on a team with me. They have flexibility. They have a lot of flexibilities, a lot of places where they can choose, what they want to do. But they do sort of feel like they're a member of the company, right? Like they represent the company. They feel like part of that team. And so, the thing that, in all honesty, you just have to, I won't use the word have, because, you can do whatever you want. Anybody can do whatever they want. But the things that people tend to, want to be aware of, and the people that track these things very closely are going to say, yeah, at least take a close look at, where the lines are drawn. If you want to get into the details of court cases and decisions and stuff like that, some of it actually, I think it's a lot easier case to make if they're remote and they don't come to a location. There's some, and it's not like physical work, because there's some like insurance things. Like I know, for example, as a piano tuner, tuning for, let's say, like Vice Media's offices in New York City, right? I'm pretty sure that was one of the cases where they needed somebody to come in and they had a piano there and they needed it tuned. Well, they make you fill out this paperwork and sign it that says, hey, I am not an employee of Vice. I am independent. And you have to show them that you have like insurance and all these things. And I think a lot of it is the liability. Like there's like if somebody gets injured, I think, right? And then it looks like they're your employee, but you're not calling them an employee. They can maybe come after you and say, hey, like I was a de facto employee, so they owe me some money or some compensation or whatever. I don't know. So not to scare you. And we could tell Ari to cut any and all of this if we want.
No, well, I think it's interesting the balance between choosing that when you're starting out.
You shouldn't be able to define their hours, I don't even believe.
Yeah, so that was exactly where I was going to go with it. Is in talk with our mastermind group, I brought up this posting, and I mentioned that it's going to be a 980 schedule where you're working 9 hours Monday through Thursday and 8 hours every other Friday. And both Randy and James were turned off by that. They were like, I would never apply for something like that if I were looking for a job, because remote work is, let's be honest, we're working probably 4 hours a day, and the rest of the time you're kind of like doing administrative type stuff or hanging out or whatever. So, and I think that's going to be the case here. I'm calling it a full-time job, but I'm honestly grappling with it. I wanted to originally do a part-time position posting, but I was advised by the Tropical MBA guys that we would get higher quality candidates if I did full-time.
Got it. Yeah, that's interesting.
But I'm kind of curious because I don't know how much time it's going to take them. I'm not monitoring them. I don't want that type of
responsibility.
That responsibility. I want someone who's going to autonomously work hard and get the right things done. And if that only takes them a few hours a day,
you're gonna try to pay them on a retainer, like a monthly or
basically
fee,
a retainer,
not an hourly thing where they track their hours and then submit them to you or something.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't think that it's. I don't charge my clients by the hour, and I don't think that it would be fair for me to. It's not aligned for me to do something different than I am, doing to my clients. This leads into another idea that I've been thinking about a lot, is just buying more time in general, something that we've talked about in the past. But I'm trying to get over this hump of if there's something that I can do to pay someone else to do it. And I haven't gone so far as to pay someone to mow my lawn, though pretty much all my neighbors do that. But yeah, like minor electrical work. I'm trying to, every time I go to
the bathroom, mow your own lawn?
I know. What kind of plebe am I, right? I don't have one of those. I really want one of those
A robot mower
robots. Yeah.
that accidentally runs over your foot and cuts off your toes or something.
Yeah. That's probably a bad idea given my kids running around in the yard. But that's something I'm excited about. What do you have going on?
Yeah. What's going on with me? Well, I've been doing this other podcast, which has been interesting. It's kind of, I realized that I've got like multiple podcasts. I'm basically just like a 24-hour podcaster. I've got this thing that I do on the weekends, which is basically like a radio show turned Zoom call for, piano nerds. And that's interesting. But it's kind of like a podcast. I published a few episodes as a podcast, but not all of them. And then I do a meeting every Monday, which is for podcasters, right? Like a couple of folks get together and we bring in guests that like know something about podcasting and pick their brains. And that's not released as a podcast, but it very much feels a lot like any session we would do. I record it, put the recordings in a little member area for some folks. And then this, the run with it. And then this other thing that got started, this Edge of NFT podcast, that thing's like, because of the sort of, the big explosion in tech right now in that's been really interesting ride so far. So
how many hours a week would you say that you're spending on these podcast related projects?
Oh, all of them, all hours.
No, seriously, would you say like 15 hours?
It's funny because it's a really interesting question, right? Because actually, one of my partners on the podcast, he's like, I'm spending this much time on the podcast. How much are you spending? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I don't even think of my time in hours. Sometimes I think it's like a good thing. Sometimes I think it's not a good thing. But I stopped like tracking hours of how much I work on various things many years ago. I think I don't know the last time that I've tracked how much time I work on stuff.
I think that's normal. I mean, I don't track how many hours I work on any of my projects, but I could give you a ballpark if I had to.
Right. For me, I think it's a little bit hard because I do a lot of, which you would probably, I want to say task switching, right? Which you'd probably rail against with like with your ultimate focus stuff.
Waving my big stick at you over here.
Yeah. It's interesting also though, because like I find that if I'm got one thing that I tell myself I'm going to do, what I end up doing is just not using all of the time of the day to work on it, even though I said that was all I should do, right? Like I don't think it's a focus problem. I could stay focused. I've got a PhD. I could spend, 2-3 hours in a class listening to someone lecture about action potentials or something like that, taking notes, paying attention, whatever. But like, I think it's just kind of like when I'm not being productive, I have this kind of thing of like, oh, well, let me get productive on that. And then I'll be productive on that. I did a few interviews, like, God, it could be like 10 years ago now. And they happen to be around creativity. And I would interview folks about their creative path and approach and opinions about creativity and stuff. And this one guy, I asked him if he experienced creative blocks. And he was like, well, yes and no, because like basically whenever I get blocked on one creative thing, I just switch to another creative thing. And then, so I'm never really blocked where I'm just sitting there, ripping my hair out, like wishing that I could make progress on something. I make progress on one thing, and then I switch to another thing, make progress on that. Long story short, I'm not sure how much I'm spending on that. But I do know how much, the Saturday event takes me at least an hour because it's an hour long. Any one of these podcasts takes at least an hour because they're usually an hour or two long of time. And then outside of that, I don't know, I'm probably doing 10,000 hours a week.
Well, all right. So you squared away from my questioning. I'm just going to give you like 60 hours.
How many hours? How do you see it? Like, how many hours do you work a week? How many hours do you spend on something?
How many hours? So my working hours are typically 7 to 5, of which I'm not working the entire time for sure. That includes like preparing. I make a giant salad every day, which takes at least half an hour to make and eat, and take the dogs for a walk, all that kind of stuff. So if I'm breaking it down into actual productive time spent working, it probably is in the order of 4 hours per weekday. So I would guess 20 hours per week, total time, productive working. And then there's some overhead of, answering emails, which if I include that, maybe that's an extra hour. So 25 hours a week, let's call it that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I are interesting. I mean, I think we totally ascribe to some of the same principles of like, make your work efficient. When you sit down to do something, put some time into it of an hour or two so that you can really focus and get it done. Like productive work is valuable. Focused work is productive work. That goes without saying, but focused work is valuable, and that focus over a longer period can sometimes be more productive. But at the same time, I think we have different approaches at the moment. I definitely, there's been a time in my life where I did track my hours. And there's been a time in my life where I think I don't make too big of a deal of it because I think the energy of it is not really worth it. But sometimes I do get upset at Tim Ferriss. And I feel like this whole 4-hour work week thing, I think it's kind of messed with a lot of people's lives because they then set this goal of working for 4 hours a week. Yeah,
and that's plagued him ever since that title has come out, right? And he certainly works more than 4 hours a week.
Yeah, it's a weird thing because I don't know what to make of this. There's a couple of things that I see in sort of business guru, productivity guru world that sometimes I just wonder, oh my God, like this person's just built a whole brand on a myth. And so like, for example, I don't know Tim Ferriss and, I'm sure I would like to, but I guess I might be burning a little bit of a bridge if this. I saw him give Gary Vee like the evil eye in a one-on-one and like make Gary Vee like say that he like takes, because I think Gary Vee will say like the 4-hour work is like bullshit. Gary Vee is kind of like this. You got to hustle. You got to work. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you got to put the time and energy into it. And so there was like a one-on-one interview between Gary Vee, who wanted, I guess, Tim Ferriss to be in his show or on his thing. And you could tell there's like this tension between them. And basically Tim Ferriss is like trying to force Gary Vee to like apologize for kind of making fun of the 4-hour work week concept, which to be honest, I kind of think it makes like Tim Ferriss look kind of a jerk because he's intimidating him into saying something that he probably doesn't really believe. Anyways, point being.
One thing I wanted to say about that too, though, is as much as Tim Ferriss's work has been caricatured into you only need to work 4 hours. I mean, somewhat deservedly so by the title of the book. Gary Vee goes the complete other direction of like hustle nonstop all the time. Yeah. And that's his shtick is complete opposite. And I mean, maybe he is doing that. I certainly don't think that you can be productive working at that level, like 120 hours a week in any job that you're at. The productivity definitely drops off. So he's selling a myth the other way.
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple of things. So the two things that I was going to mention is the 4-hour work week and this thing that came, I believe it originated from the E-Myth by Michael Gerber, and it was working on your business, not in your business. And basically, sometimes they just feel like universal recipes to have you feel self-critical about where you're at with your business and your projects. So it's like, well, if you're not only working 4 hours, then you need my help. You could really use my advice and my feedback because if you ever reach that 4 hours a week thing, then,
I don't know how many people actually take it that seriously, though. I don't know anyone who is aspiring to only work 4 hours a week in their side.
Oh, I certainly been in that case where it felt like, based on the premise of the book, that if I couldn't achieve that I wasn't achieving. Oh, that's easy to do. Like, here's the simple step-by-step process to
that
do.
Never appealed to me. I can't imagine.
I mean, look at Dane Maxwell. We both know Dane Maxwell. He's a good example of someone who sells kind of like, hey, look, I go on meditation retreats and I play my music and I have a business that runs itself. Dane
works really hard though. As well. I guarantee he works way harder than 4 hours a week.
Right. But this is what I'm trying to communicate is in the marketing.
Yeah.
People are on beaches. And then you don't even know how much time and energy and resources they put into making that picture of themselves on the beach.
Yeah. I guess what I have landed on is 25 hours per week of work is maybe not as low as I'd ever want to go, but it gives you plenty of time to do what you want to do during the week outside of that. If I wanted to take a 3-mile long hike with my dog through the woods, I could certainly do that multiple times a week for working 25 hours. There's not much benefit. I don't want to be sitting around doing nothing. That's, being functionally retired. I would go bored doing that. So
yeah. And my solution is I don't think of work hours. I just think I'd like to create a life where I can do all the things that I would want to do within the laws of physics. Do you know what I mean? So
I didn't know what category you're going to put within the laws of Mars. You're just as likely to say.
I was going to either say the laws of gravity, but that's very limited. There's more laws beyond that. And then I was going to just say the laws of the universe. Yeah, like a really good example of something that I cannot, in all honesty, gosh, there's a lot of stuff to say on this. We're clearly going down a rabbit hole, but why not? First of all, when I was getting my PhD, part of the reason it was appealing for me to become a researcher, to become a scientist, was I was like, yeah, this isn't really work. Like my ideal before that was like, what if I could get paid to read books? Because I love reading books and do research or whatever, right? And I was doing the PhD and feeling like, oh, I got to go to work. And I was like, wait a second, I'm getting paid because I was on a stipend. I was getting paid to basically do what I said I want to do. It's just like do research and explore interesting things, and, there's some hard things that are involved in it. But, and I remember even one day, I was having a little bit of a conflict with my advisor and he was like, this is not work. He's like, this is not work. And he was just kind of trying to be like, you are not working. So anyways, the other thing that I was getting to is for the NFT podcast project, I paid a visit to Los Angeles. And as part of it, I was on a panel where we were interviewing people. And then we got to use that content for the podcast. But it was at a Beverly Hills mansion that, so I really still don't know the truth on this, but it could have been P. Diddy's house that it was for sale, basically, right? So anyone who wants to come up and say, hey, we were working for those 4 hours when you were on a bus going to a party and, mingling with people. And in some senses I was working and in some senses that was just fun, so I don't know what to say about it. And it
sounds like you're averse to the term work itself.
Oh, definitely.
That's fundamentally where the issue is here.
I would say I like GSD, getting shit done. So let me just get shit done. And if that's the case, then I would say I'm doing it 24/7 but not in a way where it's wearing me down,
Yeah. What you highlighted brings up a myth that a lot of people starting out, the advice that they get is do something you love and you'll never work a day of your life. I think in general, that's bullshit, especially for people starting out. But you may be able to get to a point in your career. Both of us have been working or GSD for over 10 years. And at some point, you're able to craft your work in such a way where you are doing mainly the things that are just enjoyable to you. That's not to say that it would be enjoyable for others. For a lot of people, sitting on a panel for 4 hours would be torture. And that'd be something that they would have to do as part of their role as CEO of this company.
Right. Yeah. And for that particular, panel the actual panel only lasted a half hour, but yeah, we had to do some research and you're talking to people that are, you want to build business relationships with, so you got to be careful what you say and how you interact with them and those things. And depending on how stressful you find that, or how out of your element you are with the information you need to know and the skills that you need to have to engage on that level, then, it can either seem really stressful or really fun. Who knows? So
that's a perfect segue into something that I'm exploring as a second career, angel investing. You and I have talked about this a little bit, and there's one deal that I've already signed the dotted line on it since we talked last. to invest with How Live, which is Janne Tammermann's company. He was a previous podcast guest, and we loved the idea the first time that it was brought up back by Chris Mead, I believe. We invited Janne to talk about their product, How Live, and how things have been going for them, because it is essentially what we did. He had listened to our original episode and said, hey, this is what I'm doing. So we got to hear from him how accurate we were in our predictions. Turns out we were pretty good with our predictions. And yeah, I still love the idea. So I put some money into it, put my money where my mouth is.
Nice. Yeah, that's congratulations. So that's your first sort of independent angel investment.
First angel investment. Yeah. And I bring this up so to complete the segue here, because doing that sort of research, the financial research and thinking about the company, what's going to be big in over the next 20 years, that is fun for me. That's what I would be doing. That is what I do in my free time, just thinking about that sort of stuff. That's part of the reason I think I find the podcast is fun, is just thinking about how the world could be and how entrepreneurs can make that happen. That's exciting to me.
Yeah.
And yeah, if I start spending a lot of time in angel investing, and this sort of work can be extremely lucrative, I have to figure out, one, I mean, it's not guaranteed that I'll be successful at it, much less super successful. But if I were successful at it, I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I spent all my time angel investing and made a ton of money doing that, how would I feel about the amount of time that I'm spending in and how I'm spending my working time? I think I would feel bad about it. Right now, I feel bad if I don't get those 4 or 5 hours of solid work in per day. I just I feel icky. And at the end of the night, earlier this week, I told my wife I'm going to work tonight just because I feel like I didn't get a lot done. And I don't know. So I'm curious what that's going to feel like if it just tap dancing to work is a phrase that comes to mind from Warren Buffett, I believe, his book.
Yeah. I mean, just to go back on the topic, I think my general of like work versus play or fun, or, you never work another day in your life. I think like you choose something that you love, you do it, but don't think that you're going to continue to love it if you don't push yourself a certain percentage of the time to a point where it sometimes feels like it's not fun and that you don't love it. Because it just makes me think about fitness or running or yeah, okay, I can run a mile. But if all I ever do is run a mile and I just run a mile each day, it's like, okay, cool. I can run a mile. That's fun. Like, oh, what if you could run 2? Or what if you could run 3? Or, I definitely heard, that there's almost like a percentage or like a nearness to your limit of capacity that you want to operate in order to actually feel fulfilled. And I always think of fulfillment really as the ultimate goal here. Nobody's fulfilled by money alone. Nobody's fulfilled by work alone. Nobody's fulfilled by family alone. There's kind of like a good mix, and it's unique to each person how they're going to feel fulfilled.
Yeah, that makes sense. That reminds me of Cal Newport's heuristic of number of deep work hours. That's what he tracks. He doesn't track total time worked, but deep work. Not the shallow stuff. And he'll just have a tally every day. You might get 2 deep work hours in a day. And that's really all that you need to move things forward. And that's typically, as you said, at the edge of your comfort zone and pushing yourself forward. Let's go back to angel investing here. One thing that you had asked me about this investment is if there were any things that I was concerned with. What are some of the hard questions that I asked of Janne and Gino, who's the CEO? And one of the things that I brought up is how long it's taken them to hit a significant amount of revenue. They brought this up in 2017. It's 2021. The pandemic was could have been a big time for them to have this service available, right? When bars are shut down, to be able to have live streaming of music venues. That's the idea, by the way. We didn't explicitly state that. And yeah, it's taken them a little bit of time to ramp up. I think part of that is because of the pandemic itself, people are trimming budgets, but they had a decent answer around that. They were working on other projects to start. they're just starting to pick up now. Now they need the money to actually install the equipment in each of these different venues. And that's part of what they're looking to do in getting angel investing. So yeah, it's a big swing. We'll see how it goes.
What made you think that this would be good versus other opportunities? Did you have another methodology of looking for other opportunities? Does this just happen to be kind of what the first major one that piqued your interest that you also felt you had access to? Like, how did you measure this against what else might be on the table?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I prepared for this by following Jason Calacanis's method. He offers this program called Angel University. He does it twice a year. And I went through, it's a workshop. Takes you from not having done any angel deals whatsoever to ostensibly knowing what you need to know to start investing. I didn't follow all the rules in there, but one that I did follow is to make your bet size much smaller. I was originally thinking I was going to invest about 5x what I ultimately invested with How Live, and that really de-risked it. I think that it will allow me to learn a lot more. So to answer your question, how did I select those guys? I made the bet small enough that if it doesn't work out, it's not going to be that big of a deal.
But did you have alternates that you would have made that small bet on? Like, I think you even said Jason Calacanis, maybe he even has like a library of potential businesses you can invest in. And maybe you looked at a few of those and you're like, oh, those look good, but I like this one better. Like for me, in terms of making investments, I haven't made an angel investment per se, I don't think, but if the opportunity seemed appropriate, right? Like it was just within my purview, right? Like maybe, sometimes people raise friends and family rounds and things like that, right? Somebody that I knew, that I trusted, or I had some friends that were also investing and just sort of happened to be around, I might be, oh yeah, like if this is going to be my first, then I'll do this because I feel comfortable. I know what's going on to a certain degree. So I guess I'm getting at that. Like, is that more the bent here that it was just kind of like accessible and approachable, you understood, or were you comparing it against these other options? You said, no, this is the one.
Really putting me on the spot here.
Oh, we can stop talking about it.
No. I don't mind. I don't mind. I think it's an interesting question. I definitely a lot of the former where it's accessible, where I love the idea. Oftentimes ideas that come from non-traditional startup places, they're not located in Silicon Valley. They were formed in Europe. So they are more overlooked. And this is just a very naive hypothesis. Sure, that it's not even that unique of a hypothesis, but yeah. So that's all part of it. And then the second part of comparing it to other potential deals around, yeah, Jason Calacanis has a syndicate, which I'm getting the access to the deals via that. There is one that has come through from there that I'm planning to invest in. I've committed to investing the same amount that I'm doing with How Live. So
got it.
If so that gives you an idea.
You were looking at other ones and you actually
I am looking at other ones.
One. It wasn't like either or. It's kind of like both and type of thing.
I'm planning to do 5 or 6 a year is my goal. And this year, probably not going to do, I would not want to do that many given that it's more than halfway through and going to have a baby and all that stuff. But if I do 2 or 3 deals this year, then great. And I'm viewing that partially as, I think Tim Ferriss talked about this when he got into angel investing. It's his MBA of sorts. It's part of the learning curve. I'm going to take my best guess. I'm going to try and learn. I'm going to try and learn as much as I can up front, but then you just got to get into it and see what happens.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, that's my approach with a lot of stuff. Just get your hands dirty. I'm actually training someone. So I have this piano tuning business in New York City, and there's people come, they usually tend to work for a few years, and then maybe they move on to something else. I get new people. Part of it is like a training process. So we have people that are less experienced. We welcome them on the team. We actually charge a little bit less for them. The customer wins out a little bit because they can save money, and the technician wins out because they can get some experience on the job. So I have somebody new on the team, and I mentioned a similar concept today. What I notice because I've been in multiple domains, I feel like I've got a little bit of a perception of a system of a learning process, and when you get into different domains. And one of them is like you get into something and it's all going to seem unfamiliar at first. Like everything's going to be like really foreign. And sometimes the instincts there are sometimes instincts to reject parts of it. Like, no, that's BS, right? I don't know what you're talking about. But it's just some lingo or some facet that makes sense in this world, but maybe doesn't make sense in a different world, right? And another thing is to say, oh, well, this is too advanced for me. I need to focus on the basics. And my advice, and you know, some people, it depends on how far you want to go with this. I take it a little bit more extreme, is to go ahead and jump in to the more advanced things and be willing to not understand any of it, with the mind of the more you get exposure to it, then you actually learn what's going on. And my best example of, or maybe my most fun or my go-to example with this is when I was trying to learn about neuroscience. I was in Chicago, and I talked to somebody at the University of Chicago, a very nice woman who was running the department, the neuroscience department there at the time. Her name's Peggy Mason. And I said, hey, can I come in here? Can I participate in any way? I want to get my feet wet, my hands dirty, however you want to put it. Well, she said, well, we have a weekly neuroscience seminar. You're welcome to come join us. You know, there's just a sign-in sheet just to make sure that you're allowed in the building and come in, and there's cookies and coffee and you could watch the lectures. And so I was just obsessed with that. I was like, oh, this is what an awesome opportunity. University of Chicago, super smart people attending this lecture. I have no idea what's going on, but I'm allowed to be here. And what I did was I took notes at every lecture. I had this little notebook and I would write down what they said. And my goal was just write down what they said, even if I had no idea what it meant. And I even had some skepticism because I was so outside of the space. This could all just be BS. They just made up vocabulary words to make themselves sound smart. I don't know. So I just write stuff down phonetically. You know, I wouldn't even know how to spell it. Sometimes these people would have a lot of like great scientists come from other countries. So they'd have some weird accent I'd have to be dealing with. So I had this book of notes and I didn't even know what I was writing, but I had this book of notes. So fast forward like 2 or 3 years, I actually get into a neuroscience program, PhD program. I get into a class where I actually can sit down with a textbook and a teacher, you know, take tests, like really solidify that I actually know what's going on. And I had been involved in the actual official academic scene of it for like 3 years or something. I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years. And I found this old notebook that I had took notes in. And I started to flip through it and I was like, this actually makes sense to me. Like the notes that I took make sense to me, even though they didn't make sense at the time. I was just writing what they said phonetically. It was pretty amazing experience. So anyways, that's how I think about like what you're talking about is if you don't understand a domain, like totally not being afraid to jump in and just start trying to do something, even if it all feels very awkward.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that works out well. Oftentimes it's hard to do when it flies in the face of advice from people who have been there before. Like one of the pieces of advice from Jason Calacanis's group is to just look at 50 deals before you invest in anything.
Right.
And that does sound like good advice. And I just chose not to take it. So
what does it mean to look at? Like to like look over the terms, to like talk
they
with
often
the
have
founder.
Presentations. They often have it's like a video call where you can watch a 30-minute presentation from listen to the pitches, right? Hear the pitch. But maybe it's hubris and I'm fully prepared. I know most deals go to zero. Like
it's an average.
80%.
It's a numbers game.
Yeah, it is a numbers game. You're looking for 4 or 5 that are going 100 to 1,000x out of 25 deals that I'm trying to do. That's the goal. And yeah, we'll see.
Nice.
Let's talk a little bit about the state of the podcast here. We're nearing an hour, and
we've mostly talked about what does it mean to work.
Yeah, exactly. Which is fun for us to nerd out about, but we're really excited about the future of the podcast. So we've done 100 episodes, pretty much universally gotten good feedback from guests who have been super excited about the concept of the show, love having a chance to share new ideas. So that's been really fulfilling. One thing that we are thinking about doing in the future that we're planning to do going forward is a 10-episode series focused on environmental ideas. Ethan and I, it's no surprise to the listener that we're both consider ourselves to be environmentalists. Ethan, you had a long project. I don't know how long it was actually, but a project with composting.
A few years.
That you did in New York. Yeah. And I've been a long-time environmental advocate. That's part of the reason that I quit my chemical engineering job, is to work on environmental and sustainable businesses to help them with their marketing. Anyway, the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, released their report, which they do every several years. And it's not looking good for humanity, for the world, in terms of being able to stay under the 1.5 degrees Celsius target, which would minimize the worst effects of climate change. And thinking about what we can do as little old us on the Run With It podcast is talk about environmental ideas. So that's going to be our focus. We're going to do a 10-episode series on ideas that people can start in the environmental space, things that are going to be better for the planet.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good idea, and who knows, we might extend it further if it's useful. We find it and listeners respond, or if we enjoy it. Having been in the space, and you've been in the space too, I think one of the recurring themes that fits in really well with what our podcast does is like, is this actually a good idea, or does this just sound good? I wish I could play this Onion. There's like an Onion video skit or something where they do these spoofs on TED Talks. And this guy does a TED Talk and he's like, what if there was a car, that ran on garbage, and the audience is all like clapping. And he just, gives this long speech about what if this amazing, it just creates this imaginary world where his amazing idea is going to save the world. I actually feel like maybe it's getting a little bit better since maybe the 10 years ago where I was doing my project in the space, but it's still like people are both leveraging the feel good aspect of it and blinded by the feel good aspect of it, and just don't come up with terrible business ideas. And I think one thing that we could bring to the equation is like, okay, yeah, but let's talk about this. Like let's talk about, is it a good business idea? Let's talk about how you would get it started. And I think that could be a valuable resource for folks who are really, honestly optimistic about what can be done, want to do something, but also don't want to get stuck doing something that sounded good, but didn't actually pan out.
I think the biggest risk that happens with this is people get too idealistic and they think about, they try and tackle a much larger problem than is actually available for any one person to do, right? Electric mobility in itself is a massive problem, and it needs someone like Elon Musk to reform the transportation sector to actually get electric cars out there. There are tons of companies who have tried to do this and have failed. So if someone comes back with an idea of like, yeah, we're going to convert all of the garbage everywhere to usable energy, without having done some of the research about some of the existing efforts to do that, then I think that those are the type of ideas that we're going to have to punt on or ask folks to refine.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that hopefully will attract when we do these episodes too is people who have had success in the space, right? Like have had success with an environmentally friendly project, because there's a difference between just, somebody who maybe they're already an entrepreneur, but not in that space. Maybe that's one step better, right? But also just like people who aren't an entrepreneur at all and are just pie in the sky thinking about stuff. Hey, wouldn't it be cool? I think
we've stayed away from that because we part of the goal of the show is to get people
right. Yeah, and that's why I think we can maybe bring something special to it. But specifically, if we can get people who've been successful inside that space, I think that's also going to be helpful towards coming up with ideas and paths towards achieving those ideas that are actually practical, realistic, and doable. The one thing I wanted to just go back to when it came to environmentalism and idealism and big ideas, and I think that there always has to be a space for people to have these creative ideas and at least try them. The best way to find out whether something well, not the best way. You could do the math sometimes, and it's probably the best way. But sometimes an unpursued way of finding out whether something's feasible or not, or how it's going to be feasible, is to just go in and try it. And that's when you find out, if it can't be done the way you thought it could, maybe it could be done this way. And so let me alter this and change this and go here until we actually come upon something that works.
Yeah, I think that opportunity is especially salient now when it comes to construction type projects or building, especially with the big infrastructure plan. This is very US focused, but the US infrastructure plan, there's going to be about $4 trillion being spent on infrastructure. There are a lot of boomers that have been in these businesses and are retiring, and there's an opportunity for people to come in and either start new ones or buy existing ones and update them to the modern times. I think that's probably the easiest way to do what you're saying, of just get your hands dirty, because it's already a proven business. And if you can take something that's proven and just improve upon it in some ways, bring it up to the times, you can actually do really well.
Yeah. Well, and that's also that's a bit of a recurring theme on the show that reminds me of, just about boring businesses being some of the best ideas in terms of making money. And I was reminded of it this morning. I was driving behind a truck, and I'll make up the name because I don't remember the exact name, but it literally said Smith Tube Company. Just like, they make tubes. You know what I mean? Somebody's got to make tubes. Yep. Be either pipes or, I don't know, duct work, maybe all in everything, right? But I think that's an interesting approach, and just say, hey, like, I need to make some money. I need to do my part to participate in the workings of society so I can get some back. What if I did something that nobody else wants to do because it sounds so terribly boring? I'm going to start a tube company.
Exactly. That's the way to go. So yeah, we're going to have a 10-part series about tube companies going forward.
There you go.
Next year. All right. I think we're over time here. To the listener, really appreciate you sticking with us for 100 episodes here. We welcome any feedback that you have for things that you're interested in, things that you'd like to hear more about. If you have some ideas, feel free to send them over to us. Anything that you think that we can do to make the show better, we'd love to hear it.
I don't want to hear it, but I'm going to hurt my feelings. Send it directly to Chris at runwithit.fm.
Now you're giving away my secret email address. It's so hard to guess. It's update at runwithit.fm.
If you got any positive feedback, send it to Ethan at update.runwithit. No,
that's
what is it?
Work.
Update at runwithit. If you got any criticism, send it to Chris.
There you go. Looking forward to another 100 episodes with you.